Hello everybody, Dark Skeleton here, and in this video we're going to be reviewing 6 more Hearthstone cards for the main Streets of Gadget Sand expansion. Yeah, that's what it's called. And we're going to be starting with the Alley Armorsmith, which was revealed today. So this is a 5-mana 2/7 taunt. I believe that's the only 5-mana minion that has that stat line. And this taunt minion, whenever this minion deals damage, gain that much armor. It's a warrior card, obviously. There's a few things going on here. First off, 7 health minion is a lot of damage to go through for the enemy. Though obviously you would never play a minion just for the 7 health and taunt. If you did, then the 1/7 taunt, the oh shoot, what do you even call it? The Morgashan Warden, that's 4 mana, would be good. This has 1 more attack, and that is very relevant. It's a lot better at killing those early on week 2 and 3 drops. It's not going to be just kind of removed off the board by a high damage minion as easily. But I think what makes this card viable isn't the fact that it's just a 2/7 taunt, but that you can stack a lot more armor onto your warrior. So with these kind of taunt warrior cards, it's not only going to make a wall for aggro decks to go through, but it's also going to make it so that as you're putting out those minions, you're just gaining so much armor that your opponent really can't rush you down as the warrior anymore. And kind of the end result of that is that they have to trade minions with you. I'm not certain if playing these kind of taunt-based warrior decks is going to be good for the control style. Like, will a taunt warrior be able to out-control something like a current Cthulhu warrior? That's yet to be seen. Obviously, the taunt archetype hasn't been as strong lately, but I do think that this card has some potential. Especially when you factor in that you could slap a Rampage on it, or as we'll see later, there's a card called Stolen Goods, which also synergizes with this. And when you have Alley Armorsmith at more attack, it's going to be able to generate more armor for your hero, which is really good. Okay, so next card, the Grimestreet Outfitter. 2 mana 1/1 Paladin minion. Battlecry, give all minions in your hand +1/+1. I think kind of the archetype that the Grime Goons, whatever they're called, is really trying to go for is that you just overwhelm the board with brute strength. I mean, kind of fitting into their whole archetype. And when you have cards that like this, where every minion you play after this, at least the ones that are in your hand, are going to get more stats, you can potentially get a lot of stat value over the long run. So if people try to trade like card for card against any of the goon decks, the hunter, the paladin, and maybe especially the warrior, it's going to be very hard for them to win. Because as a 1/1, you're probably going to have, let's say, 3-4 minions in your hand, maybe more, or maybe you're playing a really slow paladin deck where you can just max out your hand at 8, 9, 10 cards all the time, and then this has the potential to even maybe go up to 4 or 5 minions that you're going to buff with this. And while the card may be really weak initially, having that extra power to the cards in your hand later on will cash in on some serious value. Not to mention that this is a really good minion to use with Brand Bronzebeard. Basically becoming a 2-mana minion, give all the minions in your hand +2/+2, which is pretty crazy, honestly. So I think this is going to be a pretty good card, if you have the right deck for it. I don't know if that's going to be Aggro Paladin or a super slow Control Paladin, but I definitely think it's something to keep an eye out for. Likewise, in that same kind of archetype, the Grimestreet Enforcer, also a Paladin minion, 5 mana 4/4. At the end of your turn, give all minions in your hand +1/+1. So not only is this pretty strong in its immediate effect, being a decent body equal to an Azure Drake on the board, but making all your minions better. I guess you would call it an immediate effect that has a long-lasting effect. Doesn't immediately gain you tempo, but it's definitely going to make it harder for your opponent to trade with your minions in the long run. But your opponent also has to immediately remove this, because it can trigger a second time at the end of your turn. So in a lot of ways, this is like Azure Drake is drawing a card better than giving all the minions in your hand +1/+1. You know, it really depends. Azure Drake, of course, being better in those spell-heavy decks, but maybe you can find an alternative way to get a lot of draw effects as the Paladin. For instance, if you're playing something like a, what's it called, Divine Favor, and then there's that new 3-mana Paladin minion, which draws you 3 1/1s into your hand from your deck. Those 2 cards might be able to give you enough minions in your hand, even as a more aggressive Paladin, to get good value out of this. Because if this gives you 2/2 value into your hand, which is very realistic, that's probably the minimum you're going to see, then it's already became effectively a 6/6. 3 minions, it's like a 7/7. More than that, it becomes ridiculous. And it also has that threat of at the end of your second turn giving extra stat value. So I think this is also a pretty good minion for Paladins going forward. Okay, and now this is probably the one that is nowhere near as good, and it makes sense because this is the neutral minion, but 3 mana, 2/4, Grimestreet Smuggler, give a random minion in your hand +1/+1. Now, as the Hunter card that's very much like this, and we'll see in a second, that card is a 3/2, and that is a lot better because that's actually a decent stat line for a 2-mana minion, but a 2/4 for 3 mana, as we've seen with the expansions that have come out, actually sucks a lot. A 2/5 isn't even really good, and a 3/4 is just the baseline you expect. So you could say it's like a 3-mana 3/5, but not really, not quite. Over the course of the game, it might churn out that way, but I don't know if it's really worth it for that kind of effect. Yes, the effect is not bad, but it's not as ridiculous as the previous ones, which give all your minions the +1/+1. Those minions aren't really that strong enough in and of themselves, but the effect is powerful enough that I think they become worth playing. This has maybe a slightly better body, but the effect is just weak, so I don't think Grimestreet Smuggler is going to see too much play. In Arena, though, I think in Arena it would be pretty good, but overall it's pretty weak. Okay, Stolen Goods. I mentioned this card earlier for the 5-mana 2/7 Warrior Taunt. Give a random Taunt minion in your hand, +3/+3. Overall, I just think that's solid. Rampage is +3/+3 to a damaged minion on the field. I feel like that card's slightly underrated, but I mean, I haven't personally been playing around with Rampage lately. But 3/3 as a buff and 2 mana is quite strong. Normally you pay 4 mana for a 4/4 Blessing of Kings buff, and Blessing of Kings is good enough to be played in some constructed decks. So 3/3 for 2 mana is good if you're playing the Taunt Warrior. Now that means Taunt Warrior have Stolen Goods, Bolster, the Board Flooding, Protect the King card, which doesn't actually synergize with Stolen Good because those 1/1s don't hit the hand, they hit the field. But playing this kind of archetype, it's getting more and more cards to make it stronger, and we might actually see something like this being good going forward. That said, you have to be playing Taunt Warrior. I think this is really strong with that specific 2/7 Taunt for 5 mana, especially given that it gets you more armor as it deals 5 damage a hit. But I guess on the downside, you're making one creature really big, so it's weak to removal. Hex might destroy you if you put down the, what would it be, a 5/10 for effectively 7 mana across 2 cards and 2 turns, and that could be pretty brutal for you. At the same time, though, PogChamp Shaman, which plays those big taunts, was working pretty well. Maybe Warrior can do something similar, so I like the concept. Okay, last card for today, the Trogg Beastmaster. I compared it to the neutral 2/4. This card is better because it's a 2-mana 3/2 with an added benefit. So Battlecry, give a random beast in your hand, +1/+1. As a hunter, that's very realistic for getting off. I would think in most cases with a standard hunter deck, you're going to have a beast in your hand. So in a way, it's like a 2-mana 4/3, which would be very strong. At the same time, though, the stat gain is delayed, so I would say it's more like a 2-mana 3/3 or something like that, if you were just saying a vanilla 3/3. But I think if it was a 2-mana 3/3, that would be pretty good still. So I think this card's overall pretty good. Kind of like a Houndmaster in a way, and Houndmaster is pretty good, though does require that beast synergy, so may not make it into every deck, but I think this card will see some play. So that's going to be it for today. Just 6 cards to go through. Overall, my favorite, definitely the alley Armorsmith. I'll be looking into that Taunt Warrior going forward. But I've been Dark Skeleton. Thanks for watching. And hopefully I'll see you guys in my future videos. So till then, guys.